for everyone at the table to hear. That was the moment something inside me cracked. My name is Vivian Deshotel, and I'm 31 years old. A year ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Steady job, stable relationship, a sense of direction. I was the kind of woman who believed in showing up for people no matter how messy they got, especially when I loved them. I grew up in a family where reliability was currency. My mother used to say, if you love someone, you stay. You fix what's broken. I carried that into every part of my life, work, friendships, relationships, especially with Cody. Cody was 26 when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was light laughter, energy music, that kind of person who filled the silence just by existing. He worked in marketing, handling event promotions for brands I'd only seen on billboards. Always on the move, always buzzing. I was quieter, a logistics coordinator at a shipping firm. My life revolved around schedules, spreadsheets, and structure. Opposites, people said. Maybe that was the appeal. In the early days, he'd drag me to rooftop parties and small gigs downtown where lights pulsed and bass drowned out the noise in my head. I'd sip soda and smile while he danced with friends, his joy intoxicating. It was chaotic, but it made me feel alive. He used to lean in after the music died and say, "You keep me grounded, Elle. You're my calm in the storm." I believed him. I built my life around being that calm. But calm gets mistaken for dull, and stability for control. Over time, Cody's job demanded more late nights. Networking, he said. I didn't question it. Everyone needs space, right? Until that space felt like a canyon. He'd come home past midnight, smelling faintly of smoke and something floral perfume that wasn't mine. His phone buzzed with messages he'd flip over before I could glance. Clients, he'd say, with a smile too casual to be honest. I convinced myself not to nag. I was the mature one, the grounded one. He'd get tired of that lifestyle come home to me. He didn't. It all came to a head one Friday night. I remember the exhaustion pressing on my shoulders after a brutal week at work. Cody texted around 8 p.m. Out with the crew at Harbor Bar. Can you pick me up later? Love you. Even then I said yes, because that's what I did, showed up. By midnight, I was driving through the city lights yawning, trying to ignore the ache behind my eyes. The bar was glowing in neon blues and pinks, laughter spilling onto the street. I parked, walked in, and immediately spotted him center table surrounded by his usual crowd. And her, Layla. I recognized her from one of his event photos, a colleague younger. Bold. She was laughing too loudly, leaning too close, her hand brushing his shoulder. He didn't pull away. For a moment, I froze. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was humiliated before it even shattered. Still, I smiled, walked over, and gently said, "Hey, it's getting late. Ready to head home?" He barely looked at me. "Not yet, babe. We're just talking." "Cody, it's past midnight. You have work in the morning." That's when he turned, his voice rising with a smirk. "God, Vivian, you're always the responsible one. Can't you just relax for once?" His friends laughed nervously. Layla sipped her drink, eyes flicking between us like it was entertainment. I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I'm not trying to ruin your fun, Cody. You asked me to pick you up." He rolled his eyes and said it, the sentence that still stings when I replay it in my head. "You're embarrassing me in front of my friends." The table went silent. Even the music seemed to fade. Embarrassing him. After 4 years of being his anchor, after covering his rent when he was between jobs, driving him home drunk, cheering him through failures he never took seriously, I forced a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll wait outside." But he wasn't done. "No, let's talk about it now. Everyone already knows how controlling you are." Layla shifted in her seat. "Cody, maybe chill." He waved her off. "No, she needs to hear this. You're like a mom, always nagging. You suck the fun out of everything. Maybe I need someone who doesn't make me feel like a kid being scolded." There it was, the kill shot. I could have argued, could have cried, but I just looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Immature, selfish a man, mistaking chaos for freedom. "Okay," I said softly. "Then you're free." I turned and walked out, every step heavier than the last. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes following me, pitying, curious, relieved it wasn't them. Outside, the night was colder than I remembered. The sound of laughter echoed faintly from the bar, mocking me. I sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles whitened. Tears didn't come, just silence. When I finally drove home, the streets blurred, under streaks of orange light. My reflection in the window looked foreign eyes, dull mouth pressed thin. Inside my apartment, everything felt too clean, too still. I poured a glass of water, stared at it for a long time, then whispered to myself, "You're not boring. You're just tired of being the only adult in the room." I crawled into bed without changing clothes, smelling faintly of smoke and humiliation. As I lay there, the replay looped in my head, his tone, his smirk, Layla's half-sympathetic glance, each detail cut deeper than the last. But beneath the pain, something else flickered, anger quiet and steady. Because love shouldn't make you feel small. And if being calm meant being invisible to him, then maybe it was time I learned to be calm for myself. Outside, somewhere across town, Cody was probably laughing, telling his side of the story. But for the first time in years, I didn't want to hear it. The silence was brutal, but it was mine. The next morning, the sunlight slicing through my curtains felt cruel. I'd barely slept, my head aching from replaying every second of that night. The humiliation, the calm I'd forced, the silence afterward. Around noon, the front door opened. I froze, half expecting it to be a dream, but there he was. Cody, sunglasses on, smelling faintly of stale liquor and expensive perfume that wasn't mine. He didn't even look guilty. "Vivian," he said, like nothing had happened. "I just came to grab some stuff." I stared at him from the kitchen table, coffee gone cold in front of me. "So that's it." He shrugged, the kind of shrug that says this was inevitable. "You were right. It's better we end it. I've been seeing Layla for a few weeks now. We just click. She's fun, spontaneous. You're safe, but safe is boring." There it was again. That word. Boring. I didn't say anything. The only sound was his duffel bag zipper scratching the silence as he threw clothes inside. He kept talking like he needed to justify betrayal by calling it self-discovery. "It started as flirting," he continued. "You were always tired, busy with work routines, rules. I felt trapped. Layla gets me." I let him talk until his words became static. My heart was breaking, yes, but under the hurt was a strange clarity. This wasn't my fault. I didn't make him cheat. I just made it too easy for him to lean while never learning to stand. When he finally paused, I said quietly, "Take what you need. I'll handle the lease later." He stopped, probably expecting tears, yelling something. When I didn't give it to him, his jaw tightened. "Don't act like the victim, Vivian. You pushed me away." I didn't respond. I simply turned my mug in my hands, watching the steam fade. At the door, he hesitated. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Don't call me," he muttered. "This is better for both of us." And then he left. The door clicked shut. The sound was so final it rang in my ears. I sat there for hours, staring at the half-packed shelf he'd left behind. A few shirts, a photo of us, at a beach, 3 summers ago, me laughing, his arm around me. I turned it face down. By sunset, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fall apart in the ruins of his choices. If he wanted chaos, he could keep it. I stood, took a deep breath, and started moving. First, I changed the locks. It wasn't spite, it was survival. Then I boxed up the rest of his things and left them with Mara, a mutual friend who'd always warned me he loves the chase more than the catch. I sent one final message. "Your stuff's with Mara. Take care of yourself." Then I blocked his number. The silence that followed was brutal. Days stretched like cold marble. Every room in the apartment echoed with what used to be us. But the silence was also clean. It didn't lie. It didn't charm. It didn't betray. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, staying late, volunteering for extra shifts. My boss noticed, even called me the most reliable person in the department. Funny Cody used to say that too, but with a sneer instead of respect. Evenings were the hardest. I'd cook too much food, then push it around the plate. Sometimes I'd play music, but every song reminded me of some moment, his laugh, his cologne, the way he'd rest his chin on my shoulder while I worked. So I started going to the gym. At first, I hated it, the mirrors, the noise, the fake cheer of trainers. But there was something cleansing about sweating through pain instead of crying through it. The weights didn't lie either. They gave back what you gave them. Weeks passed. Slowly, the ache dulled. I didn't post about it, didn't rant, didn't beg the universe for closure. I just rebuilt, quietly. One night, after a long day, I stood on my balcony, watching city lights blink like tired eyes. I realized I hadn't thought of him in hours. That felt like victory. I thought back to all the little sacrifices I'd made, the nights I stayed up waiting for him, the dinners I canceled for his emergencies, the weekends I spent fixing what he broke. I'd mistaken martyrdom for love. Now, sitting in that silence, I began learning a different kind of love, the kind you give to yourself when nobody else does. A few weeks later, Mara called. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Better than I thought," I said honestly. There was a pause. Good. Just so you know, Cody's been posting pictures. Him and Layla, all smiles. I felt a tiny twist in my chest, but it passed. Let him. That's the life he wanted. After hanging up, I deleted every photo we had. Not in anger, just release. That night, I finally slept through the night for the first time in months. When I woke, sunlight touched my face through the curtains, gentle instead of cruel. For the first time, I didn't feel dread about the day ahead. I brewed coffee, opened my window, and whispered almost to myself, let him chase excitement, I'll choose peace. And that was how the silence began to heal me. Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in quietly, almost unnoticed, through small, ordinary moments. At first, I thought I was just surviving. But somewhere between the sleepless nights and the early gym mornings, something began to shift. I wasn't Vivian the girlfriend anymore. I was just Vivian Deshotel. And for the first time in years, that was enough. 3 months had passed since Cody left. The apartment didn't feel haunted anymore. The silence had turned into a kind of peace. I'd developed routines that were fully mine. Coffee on the balcony before work. Evening walks by the river with my headphones in. Weekends hiking nearby trails, watching the horizon stretch wider than my memories of him. The gym, which once felt like punishment, had become therapy. Each rep, each breath reminded me that I could carry my own weight literally and emotionally. At work, I'd been given a new project, managing a logistics contract for a national client. It was demanding, but I thrived on it. The late nights, the spreadsheets, the problem solving, it all made sense, unlike the chaos I'd left behind. One Friday, after a flawless presentation, my manager smiled and said, "You've really stepped up lately, Vivian. Ever thought about team lead?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. I was too used to being overlooked, the quiet, dependable one. But I found myself smiling. I'd love that. That evening, I treated myself to dinner alone. A tiny Italian restaurant tucked between old bookshops. A woman eating alone might have looked lonely, but I felt serene. Across the room, a couple laughed loudly, feeding each other bites of pasta. The old me would have felt envious. The new me just smiled and thought, I hope it lasts for them. A week later, I went to a networking event my coworker insisted on. Normally, I hated those things, the small talk, the forced smiles, but something in me said, go. That's where I met Daryl Lynn. He wasn't loud or flashy, just calm, the kind of calm that doesn't need to prove itself. He worked as a graphic designer for a nearby firm, creating product visuals for campaigns I'd seen on billboards but never noticed consciously. He was standing by the coffee table, stirring sugar into his drink like it was the most delicate task in the world. I said something awkward about caffeine dependency, and he laughed. Not the polite kind, real laughter, low and warm. We ended up talking for over an hour about art deadlines, hiking favorite podcasts. There was no spark of chaos, no instant obsession, just an ease I hadn't felt in years. When he asked for my number, I hesitated. Old fear flickered. What if this turns into another slow betrayal? But something about him, maybe the patience in his eyes, made me nod. Our first date was simple. Dinner at a quiet cafe, then a walk by the river. He didn't try to impress me, didn't dominate the conversation. He just listened. When I mentioned how I'd once been told I was boring, he chuckled softly. Then I guess I'm boring too. I'd take calm over chaos any day. That night I cried in my car, not because I was sad, but because someone had finally made peace sound like a compliment. As weeks passed, I started noticing small signs of healing. I stopped checking social media for traces of Cody. I laughed without forcing it. My shoulders no longer tensed when someone mentioned love. One Saturday, Daryl and I went hiking on the same ridge I'd once stood on alone months before. The sky was wide and forgiving. As we reached the top, he looked out and said, "Funny thing about climbing halfway through, you always think you'll never make it. But once you're here, the pain feels worth it." I smiled. That's exactly what healing feels like. He turned to me, studying my face. "Then you've climbed a long way, haven't you?" I didn't answer, but I think he saw the truth in my eyes. That night, lying in bed, I replayed everything that had happened since the breakup. The humiliation, the loneliness, the quiet victories. I used to think Cody took something from me, but really he just left space I never knew I needed. A space for self-respect, for growth, for peace. For me. One evening I met Mara for coffee. She smiled as I walked in. "You look different, happier." "I am," I said, stirring my drink. "It's not perfect, but it's real." She hesitated before saying, I ran into Cody last week." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, he's still with Layla. Looks rough, though. Thinner. Stressed. Apparently they're fighting a lot." I just nodded. That's unfortunate. Mara leaned forward. You really don't care. I thought about it honestly. The old me would have said yes, pretended to be over it. But the truth was, stranger, I didn't feel anything. No, I said softly. I hope he figures himself out. But I'm done carrying his lessons. Mara grinned. Now that's growth. I laughed. It felt genuine. Later, walking home under the amber streetlights, I realized something profound. I didn't want revenge or closure or even an apology. What I wanted was what I'd already built, peace that didn't depend on anyone else. Love didn't need to be fireworks. It could be steady like a heartbeat, quiet but alive. I was no longer the woman who stood humiliated in a bar. I was the woman who left and learned to never apologize for being calm. Karma doesn't arrive with thunder. It drips steady and silent through the cracks people carve for themselves. 6 months had passed since I'd last heard Cody's name. By then, my world felt completely new, structured, peaceful, balanced. Work was thriving. I'd been promoted to team lead after the successful logistics campaign. I'd redecorated my apartment, new curtains, new couch, new energy. Even the air smelled different, lighter somehow. And then one evening, Mara texted me, Hey, not that you care, but you should probably hear this. Attached was a blurry photo from a mutual friend's Instagram story, Cody and Layla at a party. He looked disheveled, eyes, unfocused shirt, half untucked. She was dancing on a table holding a bottle like a trophy. I didn't reply, just stared at it for a long moment before setting my phone face down. I'd expected indifference. What I felt was something colder, pity. Over the next few weeks, updates trickled in uninvited but unavoidable. From coworkers who still followed the same social circles, from Mara, from whispers at gatherings I never asked about. Apparently, Cody had lost his job after missing too many deadlines. Creative burnout, he called it online, but people said it was more like constant hangovers. Layla, once the life of every party, had started freelancing, posting about self-branding and freedom, but really it was just code for no stable income. Friends who used to envy them were now rolling their eyes at their messy public drama. There were stories of screaming fights outside clubs, cryptic posts about trust issues deleted, pictures, followed by desperate reconciliations. Every story sounded the same, chaos seeking chaos. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd called me boring. Now his exciting life was burning down one hangover at a time. I didn't rejoice, but I won't lie. I allowed myself quiet satisfaction. Not the vengeful kind, more like the feeling of watching a storm move on without you. At work, my team celebrated another successful quarter. My boss toasted to leadership under pressure, and my chest warmed with pride. Not because of the recognition, but because it had nothing to do with him. No Cody, no Shadow, just me. Around that time, Daryl and I had grown closer. We weren't the kind of couple who needed grand declarations. It was small things. Him remembering my favorite tea brand. Me leaving sticky notes on his fridge with doodles of cats holding coffee cups. Us sitting in silence that wasn't awkward. One night after dinner, he said, I used to think calm relationships were boring. Turns out it's the chaos that's exhausting. I smiled. Someone once told me that peace is for people who've never felt passion. He raised an eyebrow. And you believe them? I shook my head slowly, for a while, until I realized peace doesn't mean empty. It means full of everything that doesn't hurt. Daryl reached across the table and took my hand. Then I'll take full over fire any day. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. But life loves symmetry, and the past loves showing up just when you think you've outrun it. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from Mara again. Her tone was hesitant. Vivian, I don't want to stir things up, but Cody, he's in a bad spot. I sighed. What happened? Layla dumped him. Apparently, she caught him flirting with someone else at one of those events. They had a huge scene. He's been couch hopping since. Lost his car, too. I let out a slow exhale. That sounds rough. Mara paused, almost expecting me to say more. When I didn't, she added softly, He asked about you, Said he regrets everything. I smiled faintly. Regret isn't the same as change. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed him, but because I finally saw the full picture. Cody hadn't changed. He'd just run out of people willing to carry his weight. And yet for years, I'd blamed myself for not being enough, for not being exciting, spontaneous, wild. But all along, he wasn't looking for excitement. He was looking for permission to stay irresponsible. I whispered into the dark, almost laughing at the absurdity. He called me boring, while living a life that never moved forward. For the first time, it felt funny instead of painful. Weeks later, while scrolling through social media during lunch, I stumbled on a photo someone had tagged him in. Cody behind a bar counter. Same neon blue lights I recognized instantly. The Harbor Bar, the same place where he'd humiliated me. Now he worked there. The irony stung and soothed all at once. Life had come full circle without my help. Later that evening, Daryl noticed me staring off. Rough day, he asked, pouring tea. I smiled faintly. Not rough, just poetic. He chuckled. That sounds like something I should be worried about. No, I said, shaking my head. It's just karma taking its time. He handed me my mug, eyes warm. Then cheers to patience. I raised the cup, meeting his gaze. To peace. That night before bed, I thought about how far I'd come. The woman who once begged for scraps of affection was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed to prove her worth through someone else's chaos. Karma wasn't revenge. It was simply truth returning home. And mine had finally found its way back. A year. That's how long it had been since that night at the Harbor Bar, the night I'd been told I was embarrassing in front of strangers. Funny how pain stretches time. Back then, every day felt endless. Now, standing on the other side of it, I barely recognized the woman I used to be. The scars had faded, the noise had quieted, and in its place was something softer, steadier peace. It was a Friday evening when Daryl suggested, let's go out tonight, somewhere with live music. I smiled, already halfway into pajamas. You mean outside with people? He grinned. I'll take that as a maybe. He pulled up a list on his phone. There's this place downtown Harbor Bar, supposedly great music. For a moment, I froze. The name hit like a ghost tapping on my shoulder. Daryl noticed. You okay? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, let's go. Because avoiding ghosts doesn't make them disappear. Facing them does. The bar hadn't changed much. Same neon signs, same buzz of laughter and bass. But I had changed. No trembling hands. No need to look small. Daryl's hand rested lightly on my lower back as we walked in. Warm grounding, not possessive. The kind of touch that said, I'm here if you need me, but I know you don't. We found a table near the back. I exhaled slowly, soaking in the music, the chatter, the way people leaned too close when they laughed. It was surreal returning to the site of my public undoing as the calmest version of myself. 10 minutes later, our waitress approached. I looked up, and the world seemed to pause. Layla. Her hair was shorter now, her eyeliner smudged, like she'd given up on pretending to be perfect. The glow she used to wear like perfume was gone, replaced by exhaustion. For a split second, I thought she wouldn't recognize me, but then her expression faltered. Vivian, she said softly. Wow. Hey. I managed a polite smile. Hi, Layla. Her eyes darted to Daryl. You look different. I am, I said simply. She swallowed, nodding too fast. That's great. Really. Daryl, oblivious to the history, smiled kindly. Nice to meet you. Can we get 2 IPAs and the nachos, please? Of course, Layla murmured. I'll get that started. She walked off quickly, her shoulders slumped under invisible weight. I watched her go, not out of cruelty, just curiosity. The woman who once stood next to Cody mocking my quietness was now serving drinks in the same place they'd humiliated me. Karma wasn't just poetic, it was painfully symmetrical. I was still processing when another voice came from behind me. Vivian. I turned. Cody. He looked thinner, older. The boyish charm had evaporated, leaving a man who looked permanently tired. His hands were rough, his shirt slightly stained, his name tag crooked. Hey, he said, voice uncertain. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give to a stranger who's mistaken you for someone else. Hi, Cody. He glanced at Daryl, then back to me. So this is my fiancé, I said gently, the word rolling off my tongue like music. Cody blinked. Fiancé. Daryl reached out, shaking his hand. Good to meet you, man. Cody's fingers twitched, grip weak. He looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Wow. You moved on fast. I tilted my head. No, I healed fast. There's a difference. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I've been meaning to call you, he said finally. I made a lot of mistakes. I nodded. I know. I thought maybe we could talk. Just clear the air. Daryl looked at me silent, trusting me to handle it. I met Cody's gaze, calm but unwavering. Cody, you humiliated me here. You said I was boring, that I held you back. And now standing here, I realize I didn't lose anything. I just stopped trying to save someone who didn't want to grow. He flinched. You don't have to rub it in. I'm not, I said softly. I just don't need to carry your apology. I let go a long time ago. He laughed once bitterly. She left me, you know. Layla. After everything. I know, I said. And I hope someday you learn to stop choosing storms and start building shelter. His lips parted, but no words came. Behind him, Layla was watching tray in hand, eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and regret. Daryl reached for my hand. I stood. We should get going. The music's too loud anyway. As we passed Cody, I paused for a heartbeat, meeting his eyes one last time. You once said I was embarrassing, I said quietly. Turns out peace just looked unfamiliar to you. Then I walked out. Outside, the air was cool, the city humming softly around us. Daryl squeezed my hand. You okay? I smiled genuinely. Better than okay. We walked down the street, laughter from the bar fading behind us. For a long moment, I thought about how endings don't always come with fireworks or final words. Sometimes they arrive as silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Cody's laughter used to echo in my head like a wound. Now it was just background noise from a story that no longer belonged to me. I looked at Daryl, who was talking about weekend plans, his face lit by the streetlights. My heart felt steady. Hey, I said suddenly. He turned smiling. Yeah, thank you for choosing peace with me. He chuckled. It's the best kind of adventure, isn't it? I nodded, glancing once at the reflection of the neon sign behind us. Harbor Bar, its light flickering weakly fading against the night. I whispered more to myself than him. He called me boring. But maybe boring is just what peace looks like to people who've never earned it. And with that, I walked forward hand in hand with a man who never needed saving, leaving